The moment Sloane whispered, "The stinky country girl is here," across my own ballroom, something in me snapped. My family thought I was a middle manager. They thought my brother Garrett was the golden child. They had no idea I was the one who paid for the champagne they were drinking. And I was about to show them the receipt for the farm he'd just lost.
The champagne bubbles were rising in my glass, but all I could taste was the dust of the farm I'd left behind 10 years ago. I stood in the corner of the Grand Meridian Ballroom, a space I'd technically paid the mortgage on, wearing a dress that cost more than my father's first tractor. I felt invisible. That was my superpower, really. In this family, being the quiet one meant you were essentially furniture. I watched the elite of the city swirl around the room, their laughter clinking like expensive ice. None of them knew who I was. To them, I was just the plain sister, the one who stayed in the shadows while the sun rose and set on my brother, Garrett. "Look at her," a sharp, melodic voice cut through the hum of the string quartet. "The stinky country girl actually showed up. I'm surprised she didn't bring a bale of hay as a +1. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Sloane. She was Garrett's fiancée, a woman who treated life like a high-stakes audition. She was draped in silk, leaning against a marble pillar, smirking at her bridesmaids. They giggled, that high-pitched practice sound of people who have never worked for a dime. I took a slow sip of my drink. My hands weren't shaking. For years, the sound of Sloane's voice or the sight of my mother doting on Garrett while ignoring my existence would have sent me into a spiral. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't just Elara, the daughter who did something in tech. I was the CEO of Valerius Holdings. I was the woman who had quietly bought the debt of Garrett's failing firm. I was the person who owned the very air Sloane was breathing in this ballroom. I looked at the marble floors and the massive crystal chandeliers. My family thought Garrett had secured this venue through his connections. In reality, my CFO had authorized the family discount that made this engagement party possible. Every bit of this luxury was a gift from the sister they treated like an afterthought. "Elara, honey, move a bit to the left," my mother said, brushing past me without making eye contact. She was adjusting the flowers, her face tight with pride. "This is their big night. Let's try to look presentable." "Of course, Mom," I said softly. I moved. It was a practiced motion, a decade of shifting myself out of the frame so Garrett could shine. Presentable. I'd spent $30,000 on this event anonymously just to make sure the catering didn't humiliate my parents, and I was still in the way. I watched Garrett laugh, his arm around Sloane. He looked successful. He looked like the man my father always wanted him to be.
But I knew the rot behind the drywall. I'd seen the balance sheets. The Whitmore merger Sloane had been bragging about was a shell game. The Whitmores weren't wealthy. They were scavengers picking my parents' remaining legacy clean. The betrayal didn't start with Sloane. It started years ago when my father would look past me to ask Garrett about his dreams. It started when they sold heirloom jewelry to pay for Garrett's third attempt at a degree, while I worked 3 jobs to pay for my first laptop. I learned early that if I wanted a seat at the table, I'd have to build the table myself. I built it in silence, fueled by the cold realization that my family's love was a finite resource, and Garrett had used up the entire supply. Sloane caught my eye and blew a mocking kiss. She thought she'd successfully pushed the poor relation to the margins of the family portrait. What she didn't realize was that when you spend your life being underestimated, you see everything. I had the documents, I had the proof of the fraud Sloane's father was committing, and most importantly, I had the power to stop it. The music shifted. It was time for the toasts. Garrett took the microphone, looking every bit the victor. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he started, his voice booming, "especially the Whitmores. Joining our families isn't just a marriage, it's a powerhouse merger." I felt the weight of the flash drive in my clutch. I wasn't here for a gotcha moment. I was here because if I didn't act tonight, my parents would be homeless. Garrett had signed away the farm as collateral for a loan he'd never be able to repay. I walked toward the tech booth. The technician looked up, confused. I handed him the drive and gave him the nod. "Start the video," I whispered. The screen behind Garrett flickered to life, but it wasn't photos of them in Santorini. It was a ledger, A very specific, very red ledger. The room went silent. Garrett turned around, his smile freezing, as his own signature appeared on the screen, attached to a document titled Transfer of Deeds. My father stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the screen. He knew that document. It was the deed to the land that had been in our family for 4 generations. "Garrett?" he asked. "Why is our home on that screen?" The air in the ballroom felt like it had been sucked into a vacuum. "It's not a joke, Dad," I said, stepping into the light. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. I walked toward the stage, the crowd parting for me. "Elara, sit down," my mother hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. She was still trying to protect the image. "You're ruining everything. Your brother is trying to build something." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes and the ingrained habit of protecting the son who was currently drowning them. I gently pulled my arm away. "He's not building anything, Mom. He's being dismantled, and he's taking you with him." I climbed the steps to the stage. Garrett tried to block the microphone, his face a mask of sweating panic. "Elara, get off the stage. You're making a scene." "I'm ending a crime, Garrett." I looked at Mr. Whitmore, who was trying to slip toward the exit. "Mr. Whitmore," I called out, "the authorities are at the front entrance. Since I own this building and the company that manages your firm's debt, I've authorized the release of all your data to the SEC." The room gasped. Sloane's father stopped, his face turning gray. "You own what?" Garrett stammered. "Elara, you're just a middle manager." "I own Valerius Holdings, Garrett. I founded it 5 years ago. I used it to buy your debt when I realized you were too proud to tell Mom and Dad you'd lost their savings." I looked at Sloane. She looked like she wanted to lunge at me. "You're lying," Sloane spat. "You're just a pathetic loser from a farm." "Check your phone, Sloane," I said calmly. "Your father's assets were frozen 10 minutes ago. Your engagement ring? It was bought on a credit card that was just declined for the catering bill tonight, a bill I've already settled, because unlike you, I actually care about the people in this room." My father walked toward the stage. "Is this true, Elara? You bought our debt?" "Everything, Dad." Garrett didn't do his due diligence. He wanted the prestige of the Whitmore name so badly he didn't check the math. "I've been trying to tell you for a year that something was wrong, but you told me I didn't understand high-level business." The golden child was trembling now. The facade was gone. Garrett looked at me, and I saw the little boy who used to break my toys. He wasn't sorry. He was sorry he'd been caught. "The party is over," I announced to the room. "There are buses waiting outside, except for the Whitmores. You'll find the police waiting in the lobby." As the guests scrambled into a chaotic exit, I felt a strange sense of peace. The betrayal was out in the open, but as I watched my parents collapse into their chairs, the true weight of the resolution sank in. Winning didn't feel like a parade. It felt like standing in a field after a massive storm. The air was clear, but the crops were flat. I looked at Garrett, who was staring at his hands. He had lost everything in 10 minutes. But as I turned to leave the stage, I saw Sloane whispering frantically into her father's ear. They weren't done. Scavengers never are until the last bone is picked clean. I walked away, realizing that saving my family was only the first step. Now I had to decide if I wanted to keep them. The aftermath was a blur of lawyers and long conversations. In the weeks following the disaster, the truth settled. Garrett hadn't just been tricked, he'd been actively negligent, ignoring dozens of red flags because he was desperate for the status the Whitmores promised. He'd signed away the rights to our family's land as collateral for a loan he didn't understand. I sat in my office on the 42nd floor, looking at the deed to the farm. I'd bought it back. I'd cleared the debts. I'd even set up a trust for my parents that Garrett couldn't touch. I spent hours staring at the paperwork, wondering how many years of my life had been spent preparing for this moment. I had become a billionaire not just for the money, but for the security I never felt as a child. My mother came to see me a month later. It was the first time she'd ever been to my office. She sat on the edge of the chair, looking small. The confidence she carried in the ballroom was gone. "We didn't know, Elara," she said, her voice shaking. "We thought we were helping him build a legacy. We thought you were okay because you never complained." "That's the problem, Mom," I said. "I never complained, so you assumed I didn't have any needs. You took my stability for granted and treated Garrett's chaos like a virtue. You rewarded his failures with more chances, and you rewarded my success with silence." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. She reached out across the desk. "We were wrong. Your father, he's ashamed. He can't even look at the farm right now." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that an apology didn't fix the years of being the afterthought. I wanted to tell her about the nights I worked 20-hour shifts while Garrett was out at galas on her dime. But I realized that holding on to that anger was just another way of staying tied to their drama. I had become my own armor. "I've settled everything," I told her. "The farm is yours, but Garrett stays away from the finances. He needs to find a job, a real one. If I find out you're giving him money from the trust, I'll dissolve it." "He's staying in a motel," she said. "He says he can't show his face in town." Good. Reality is a hard teacher. I realized then that the revenge wasn't the point. I hadn't destroyed my family. I'd dismantled the lie they were living. I'd forced them to see me, yes, but more importantly, I'd forced them to see themselves. Sloane was gone. She disappeared the moment the money did. Garrett was living in a small apartment, on the condition that he attend therapy. I stood up and walked to the window. The city stretched out before me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was looking at it from the outside. I had been the country girl they mocked, but I was also the woman who survived them. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. "Coming into the city tomorrow. Would love to take you to lunch. I want to hear about how you built all of this. I'm proud of you, Elara." I stared at the screen. "I'm proud of you." 5 words I'd waited 25 years to hear. They didn't fix the past, but they were a beginning. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about deciding what you're willing to carry forward. I chose pride over resentment, but as I prepared to leave, the intercom buzzed. My assistant's voice sounded tense. "Elara, there's someone here to see you. She's refusing to leave until she speaks with the girl who thinks she won." It was Sloane. I told my assistant to let her in. Sloane walked into my office, but she wasn't the polished debutante anymore. Her hair was messy, her coat looked lived in, and the smugness had been replaced by a sharp, jagged desperation. She didn't sit down. She marched right to my desk. "You think you're so much better than us," she hissed. "You played the long game. You sat there at dinner knowing you were going to gut my family. You're a predator, Elara. You just have better PR. You waited until the most public moment to destroy us." I looked at her with genuine pity. She was still looking for someone else to blame. "I didn't gut your family, Sloane. Your father did that when he decided to steal. I just stopped him. There's a difference between a predator and a gardener. I'm just pulling the weeds. I needed everyone to see the truth, so it couldn't be twisted." "Garrett won't even talk to me," she said, her voice cracking. "He thinks I was in on it." "Were you?" I asked. I leaned forward, looking her directly in the eyes. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence confirmed that she liked the view from the top too much to ask about the foundation. She traded her conscience for a lifestyle, and now she was looking for a refund. "I'm not going to sue you, Sloane," I said, standing up. "I don't have to. Your reputation will do that for me. But I want you to leave this office and never contact my family again. You're the cost of Garrett's education." "You're cold," she whispered. "No," I replied. "I'm just finished." After she left, I took the rest of the day off. I drove back to the farm. It was autumn, and the air smelled of dry leaves and wood smoke. It was the smell of my childhood, but without the weight of the expectations. My father was out on the porch, rocking in the chair I'd bought him. He looked older, but there was a softness in his face. "Hey, boss," he said, a teasing glint in his eye as I climbed the steps. "Don't start," I laughed, sitting on the steps beside him. "I mean it. You saved us. I spend so much time looking at the horizon, waiting for Garrett to become something great, that I missed the greatness sitting right at my dinner table. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to do it all alone." "It's okay, Dad. I found it myself. That's what matters." The moral resolution wasn't a cinematic hug. It was a quiet acknowledgement. My family was flawed, and I was no longer defined by their perception of me. I looked out over the fields. This land had once felt like a prison. Now it felt like a foundation. I could keep it, or I could sell it. It was mine. I thought about the ballroom, about Sloane's sneer and the way the champagne tasted like dust. It felt like a lifetime ago. The stinky country girl had turned her pain into an empire. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the architect of my own life. I had learned that self-reliance means being the person you can count on when the lights go out. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows, I felt a deep, grounded sense of belonging. Not because my family finally saw me, but because I finally saw myself. Trust is fragile. Garrett and I would never be close. My mother and I would always have a careful relationship, but that was okay. I didn't need a perfect family to have a perfect life. I didn't need their validation to be whole. I had built my own armor, but here, under the vast open sky, I finally felt safe enough to take it off. I had taken back everything they tried to take from me, my dignity, my future, and my voice. And as I sat there with my father watching the stars, I realized the best part. It was finally over. I didn't have to be the strong one for them anymore. I could just be Elara Miller. I wasn't the victim of their story anymore. I was the hero of mine. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the earth. I breathed it in deeply. It didn't smell of struggle. It smelled of home. It smelled like a beginning. The golden child had fallen. The empire of lies had crumbled. And in the wreckage, I had found the only thing that actually mattered, the knowledge that I was enough. I stood up, kissed my father on the cheek, and walked toward my car. I had a board meeting at 8, a life to lead, and a future that belonged entirely to me. I had built an empire from the scraps of their neglect. As I drove down the driveway, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Everything I needed was right here in the steady beat of my own heart and the quiet power of a girl who refused to stay small. The world was big, and I was ready to meet it on my own terms. No more silence, no more hiding, just the truth, loud and clear, echoing through everything I'd built. I was Elara Miller, and I was just getting started.